Oh, howdy. Didn't see you there. I was just reading some history. Welcome to Heimler's History. My name's Steve Heimler. I'm here to help you get an 100 on your test and a 5 on your exam in May. As you probably already know if you clicked on this video, today we're going to be covering the development of aggressive imperialistic states between 1910 and 1945 and their effect on global geopolitics during and after the World Wars. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What does that even mean? Do you mind explaining yourself? To that I say, no problemo. In layman's terms, who was trying to take over the world, or at least gain significant amounts of land? And how did they go about it? And what was their effect on the global stage during and after the World Wars? Now, this is a hugely complex topic, and no one could ever cover everything that they need to cover in such a short amount of time. But let me tell you something. You can bet your bottom dollar I'm gonna try. As you watch this video, you might notice that something is a little bit different than usual. And no, it is not that I have a full head of hair, okay? As you watch this video, you'll see scenes from some of your favorite TV shows that will help elaborate and help you retain information that you learn during this video. Now, without any further ado, if you need your brain cows milked, I know no one better to milk them than me. Let's get to it. For our purposes today, the imperialistic states that we're going to be looking at include Russia, Japan, Italy, and Germany. In the years and decades leading up to World War I, Europe was incredibly fractured. So fractured that one German socialist by the name of Friedrich Engels was able to accurately predict World War I 35 years before it actually happened. Along with other things, Friedrich Engels predicted that World War I would be brutal. This brings me to the next point I want to make. This video was designed to be funny, but I don't want that to take away from the seriousness or the severity that is associated with World War I and World War II. So just remember that millions of people suffered and you should not take this topic lightly. With that said, let me introduce you to one of the main belligerents of the war, Germany, with this clip right here.
Boom! Freeze! Michael Schoon, FBI, you know you did! Boom! 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 Yeah, you thought you could get away with your little ruse, didn't you? Didn't you? Well, you didn't, because I know where you hid the diamonds. I've been on to you and your little friends for weeks. Boom! Boom! Boom!
I'm not even in the scene!
Boom! Stop! They're not. Stop! Boom!
Okay, she shot me. Great.
What?
Stop.
Why?
Okay, you can't just shoot everyone in the scene.
Well, if you hadn't stopped the scene, you would have seen where it was going.
Okay, what about the scene they set up?
Boring.
No, it wasn't. No more guns.
Could have
No. Michael, why don't you give me all the guns you have? Just get rid of all your guns and give them to me. Great. Yeah, okay.
Germany did attack all the countries whose flags were displayed in that clip, and more. But you may be thinking, Steve, what's going on? I thought that Belgium was neutral during World War I. And you're right. Belgium was neutral during World War I, and they restated their neutrality when Germany tried to invade from the north as part of the Schlieffen Plan. Germany, however, violated this neutrality by systematically attacking villages and people in Belgium during the invasion, killing 25,000 Belgians in the process. You may have also noticed at the end of that clip, the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, okay.
That'll become important later, just hold that thought in your head. When Germany joined the war, it was clear that they wanted one thing, to expand their territory. For Germany, this included territory in Russia, Belgium, and France, as well as a pursuit for an African empire. Now let's shift over to the other side of the world and focus on what Japan was doing during this time. Just like Germany, Japan was being aggressive and imperialistic and was looking for land all the time. Japan only joined World War I after realizing they could seize some of Germany's Pacific territory in Oceania. In this way, Japan is similar to Germany in that they both wanted similar things when joining the war. One of the main things you should take away from World War I is that it was brutal. Millions of people died due to fighting, starvation, diseases, and more. One significant event that occurred at the end of World War I was the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. You may have noticed in the last scene that was played, the man labeled the Treaty of Versailles demanded that Germany gave him all the guns that it had.
Why don't you give me all the guns you have?
For Germany, the Treaty of Versailles meant 3 different things. 1. Loss of territory. 2. Reduction of military forces. And 3. Forced reparation payments to the Allies. With the Treaty of Versailles signed and formalized, this spelled trouble for Germany, who found themselves nearly powerless after the treaty.
So, due to Michael's clever financial maneuvering, he finds himself tremendously in debt.
You're broke?
How did you get that from what Oscar's saying?
I mean, Michael, how did this happen? Where exactly did your money go?
How can I get you to stay?
Money.
Yeah. We all want money. But there is none on the budget. So, tell me why you're really leaving.
Money.
More money, more problems, Stanley. You of all people should know that. Let me ask you this. If I were...
Money.
Similarly to Germany, Russia found themselves in an unfortunate position after World War I, but not exactly for the same reasons. While Germany fell victim to war guilt, Russia found their resources depleted at the hands of poor war tactics and lamentable circumstances.
Michael, are you having money problems?
Monkey problems? No, I'm not having monkey problems. Why would I have monkey problems?
I know you heard me correctly.
Oh, I hate monkeys.
Coming back around to the Treaty of Versailles, it famously included the planned formation of an organization known as the League of Nations. This organization was created in order to provide a forum for resolving international disputes so that a conflict as devastating as the Great War would never occur again. There is one problem, however, seeing as the United States did not exactly embrace the organization.
No, I hate it! I hate it! I don't hate it. I just don't like it at all. And it's terrible.
Yo, Mike.
Okay. You know what? Hold on, Daryl.
You just said you hate it.
No, I hate the style.
There are many reasons why the United States would refuse to join the League of Nations, although most historians agree that it had something to do with isolationists in Congress believing that joining the organization would lead to unnecessary international conflict. Before we move on from World War I think it's time for a little fun fact. As you all know, being a pilot in World War I was one of the most difficult jobs you can have, even for the military, so some pilots would take up superstition in order to keep their hopes alive. Some pilots were even known to have depictions of skulls or grim reapers in their cockpits in order to ensure that whoever shot them down would eventually suffer the same fate.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
Now that we've pretty much covered World War I, it's time to move on to World War II. When most people think of World War II, the first thing they think of is the Nazis.
What's a Nazi?
What's a Nazi?
Nazi was a fascist movement from the 1930s.
Don't talk
in
about
Germany.
Nazis in front of... You know what? They're going to
30s.
have nightmares, so why don't you just shut it?
Well, he's right. The Nazis were a fascist movement that started in the 1930s, specifically 1933, which also happened to be the year that the most notorious figure of World War II, Adolf Hitler, came to power. Adolf Hitler remained in power until 1945, when he allegedly killed himself along with his wife and his dog. In 1933, at the beginning of World War II, three powers emerged which were known as the Triple Entente. This Entente consisted of Russia, France, and Britain, and they were the main allies of World War II.
And as you can see, they are very different sizes. What you might want to do is kind of a Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear thing. That might be kind of fun. Mama Bear. Who else?
On the other side of the war were the Axis powers. Along with Adolf Hitler, there was another fascist dictator that rose to power during this time.
Now this gentleman right here is the key to our urban vibe.
Urban? I grew up in a small town. What about me seems urban to you?
Stanley is hilarious.
Often compared with Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini was a charismatic fascist dictator that ruled in Italy during the Second World War. During World War II, Italy was ambitious, and they did show a little bit of promise, but at the end they sort of petered out and only gained a little bit of land in the northeast of their original territory. Germany was also very ambitious, and they were kind of all over the place. At one point, they even tried to make a deal with Spain to get to the bottom of the Iberian Peninsula to block off Gibraltar from Britain in what was known as Operation Felix, which if it was successful, would have looked a little something like this.
Michael.
Whoa.
Oh! Vamonos!
Bueno!
The reason that Gibraltar was so important to Germany is because it was a strategic port for Britain to import and export goods and resources back to the mainland. Eventually, Germany decided that it would be not in their best interest to go along with the plan, and eventually the whole thing was cancelled. While we're on the topic of Germany, let's talk about Adolf Hitler. Many historians suspect Hitler of heavy drug use, including the use of methamphetamine and other drugs.
I am ridiculously anti-drug. I am so anti-drug that I am above suspicion in any way that involves suspicion or testing of any kind.
During World War II, Hitler and Stalin made a deal known as the German-Soviet Pact, in which both parties agreed not to attack each other if they both got a piece of Poland. As you can imagine, Hitler did not stay faithful to this deal.
I lied to Michael. I said that I would leave him alone, but I will not.
Germany ended up attacking Russia in June of 1941 and put a huge dent in their army. Now let's circle back and focus on Japan. It's early December 1941, and Japan is planning their infamous attack on Pearl Harbor.
I'm willing to stake my entire reputation on it.
Okay. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
And thus, Michael Scott sealed his own destiny. In a good way.
Actually, as you might have guessed, it was not in a good way. By attacking Pearl Harbor, Japan earned itself 2 nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and bad reputation in America for years to come. Luckily for Japan, however, they experienced what is now known as the Japanese economic miracle, in which they had record economic growth in the years following World War II. Now let's circle back around and focus on Germany. It's the end of World War II, and Germany is losing on both fronts. They're going to have to pull a rabbit out of a hat if they still want to win this war. That rabbit's name is the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive, was Germany's last major offensive and took place on the Western Front in Belgium.
Okay. Wow, this looks terrible.
Break me off a piece of that grape.
Andy, this is a pivotal scene in the ad. And if we don't get this, if we don't nail it, we're going to lose the whole triumph of the moment. The triumph of the will.
Unfortunately for Germany, they are unable to prevail and end up losing the Battle of the Bulge, which ultimately leads to them losing the Second World War. Now you might have heard Michael say, triumph of the will.
The triumph of the will!
Believe it or not, The Triumph of the Will is the title of a World War II Nazi propaganda film co-produced by Adolf Hitler himself. Propaganda was very important for the war effort during World War I and World War II, as it helped the government gain the favor of the people during the war. When you think about war, especially World War I and World War II, you think about the people that survived and the people that died, but you don't really give much thought to the people that were captured. Prisoners of war were usually beaten or starved in captivity. Luckily, this trend was put to an end in the Second Geneva Conventions in 1949.
Listen up, kid. I don't like you, but because some town in Switzerland says so, you have rights.
That town in Switzerland that Dwight is talking about is Geneva, where leaders from around the globe gathered and decided that prisoners of war had to be treated like prisoners of regular government prisons and could not be starved or beaten and had to be given good treatment. Now that we discovered how these different imperialistic states developed and how they acted during the world wars, what were the consequences? One of the main consequences that came from these wars was a war between the United States and the Soviet Union known as the Cold War. The Cold War was less of a war and more of a series of proxy wars and an arms race between the two nations. The Cold War reached its climax in 1962 when the United States realized that the Soviet Union was trying to place nuclear weapons in Cuba. This event was known as the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Whoa, what are you doing?
I'm just scaring him. No, the trick is to make him think you're going to do something to him.
I can hear you, man.
Shut up, or I'm going to punch you in the throat!
Hey, stop it! Stop it! No! God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No.
In reality, it's impossible to tell whether the Cuban Missile Crisis was just a threat or if the Soviet Union actually had plans to use the nuclear weapons. Overall, the development and actions of aggressive imperialistic states in World War I and World War II had a negative effect on the global stage during and after the wars. There are many tragedies that occurred during this time from imperialistic states imposing their will on other states. One prime example of this is the numerous genocides that occurred. The most famous of these genocides is known as the Holocaust. Because of these genocides and other similar events, the world may never be able to fully recover from what the imperialistic states did during this time period, since many of the events had such a huge death toll. Alright folks, that's about all the time we have for today. Remember, today we learned about the development of aggressive imperialistic states from 1910 to 1945, and their effect on the global stage during and after the wars.
Bye.